Welcome to the Butterfly Effect Studio. I'm your host, Christian Rebernik. As you know, based on the chaos theory, small things can have a big impact. The goal of this session is to uncover how leaders, change makers developed their purpose, their competencies, and their community to have a great positive impact. Every of the episode is packed full of ideas you can apply to your own life. In this conversation, I'm speaking to Bennet Barth, Managing Director at the Respond Accelerator. His work dedicated to embed sustainability at the heart of innovation and investments. Great to have you in the studio.
Hi, good to be here, Christian.
Bennet, tell us a little bit more about your motivation. What has driven you in the past years, actually? What is the roots of your purpose?
Sure. So I think I always struggle to sort of refer back to that red thread in my life because I don't think I have figured it out ever so clearly what that would be. But I know for myself that my motivation very much comes from working with inspiring people and really trying to support their cause in embedding sustainability or developing new solutions that drive the sustainability on our planet. And with that, I'm focusing, when I say sustainability, I'm not only focusing on the environmental components, but I also believe that also on the social and cultural side of things, or societal side of things, we need to have an understanding of what sustainability is and how to get there eventually.
Looking back on your achievements, what are you most proud of?
Well, there is a number of things, to be honest. I would say one of the most amazing times in my professional career was actually right out of the gates of university when I started at a small startup at the time in Portugal where I chose to live and study at the time. The company was called Maze, and it was very much one of the pioneers in the social innovation space in Europe and particularly also in Portugal. And one of the things we did with Maze was to put together a impact venture capital firm that went on to raise by now almost 60 million euros in venture capital money from different LPs, both private investors and high net worth individuals, but also institutional investors such as the European Investment Fund. And for me, coming right out of university, going through the journey of putting together the value proposition for a venture capital fund, to go through the fundraising process and dig into the very first deals and the diligences we did at the time, was, I think, one of the most amazing experiences. And then also carrying sort of those experiences and those insights onwards into my next steps in the career, I think my focus has sharpened into working with entrepreneurs and supporting them, be it through capital or be it through network or capacity building modules and sessions, and really helping them succeed on their impact mission that they're on.
And why has your focus shifted to entrepreneurs?
Well, I think so my background in my family, I come from a very entrepreneurial mindset. My dad used to be an entrepreneur in the real estate business. And he actually was a very successful entrepreneur by being a very social entrepreneur at the same time. So what he focused on in his real estate work was actually a lot of social housing projects, for example, or just in general, very friendly and very humane terms in which he would handle those that rent his apartment, the tenants, and just overall project development in itself. And by being very socially minded and a very fair real estate owner, if you will, he also managed to be exceptionally successful. So he had a very good reputation. Both the city government as well as property owners were very happy to work with my dad for this reason. So I think my ingrained ways of working, or my ingrained motivation, really comes from that social entrepreneurship side of things. Then during my my studies, I also peered into development cooperation, for example, as a way to improve living conditions across the globe. But I also noticed that probably working with government or government agencies doesn't really match my temper or the pace that I like to work on and like to work with. Hence, the shift to the entrepreneurship world is where sort of the energy really sort of gets to me.
So that's totally relatable to me. I think the interactivity on the interaction, how you can actually pursue this kind of impact you have is high dynamic. But you talked already about the competence you admired in your father, but also about social entrepreneurship and the relevant skills there. Let's talk a little bit more about that. What do you think are the important competences actually to be a successful entrepreneur, to actually have a positive impact? What from your perspective, maybe from your own side, what has helped you the most?
I love the question, Christian, and I think it is one that needs a twofold answer, because I think the skill set you need to be a successful entrepreneur is very different to the skill set you need to be a successful impact entrepreneur. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I believe that the ecosystem, the environment that we operate in, still very much values sort of a traditional framing, a traditional understanding of what success in entrepreneurship is. And if you look around with the latest news around Adam Newman, for example, and how he got funding for his new venture, etc., I think this just goes to underline the fact that there is different definitions of success out there. So answering the first part of the question, to be a successful entrepreneur, I think you need an incredible amount of drive. You need an incredible amount of willingness to fail and learn, and to move beyond failure and literally learn from it and implement the learnings and iterate fast. And eventually, I also think you need to feel when it's the right time for you as an entrepreneur sort of to delegate some of the things that you start working on as a solo founder or as a small founding team. You need to hit the sweet spot of when is the right time to let go of certain things and bring in new people that are actually smarter than you. And I think that moving beyond your ego is actually one of the challenges that come up along the way. And there is actually tons of research also about what makes a great entrepreneur, etc. What there isn't so much research about is what makes a great impact entrepreneur. And I think here, because it is a fairly emergent space still, the definitions or the requirements or the success factors of a successful impact entrepreneur are still kind of murky and more anecdotal perhaps than in the space of the traditional entrepreneurship. From my point of view, one of the core competencies or core skills of an impact entrepreneur is the way we think about systems. Now, traditionally, we come from a very mechanistic, simplistic kind of worldview, sort of A triggers B, and that triggers C, etc. And for successful impact entrepreneurs, the ability to understand systems as a complex and even living, so dynamic sort of structure, where you need to look far beyond sort of the immediate repercussions of your action into different shareholder groups or different stakeholder groups or different communities or along the entire process of a value chain of the product that you're producing, for example. It is seeing and acting upon those kind of interconnectednesses in between, if you will, to really be able to make sure that the impact that you're intending to have is actually going to happen in the way that you want it. So literally embracing the complexity of systems, I think, is a core competence. And of course, this is hard, and of course, this makes it more difficult to understand what is actually happening or to understand how your supply chain will actually play out in your business, etc. And the second skill that I would say is key for impact entrepreneurs is to be okay with that complexity, and is to be okay to be living in an environment of volatility, ambiguity, uncertainty, etc. And coming up with a mindset that is able to cope with those challenges and complexities is, in the end of the day, a difficult task. So if you look around in the entrepreneurship space, and especially impact entrepreneurs, they're incredibly at risk of mental health sort of stresses and struggles because of that ambiguity and because of that volatility. And coming up with a sort of the notion of resilience as an impact entrepreneur and dealing with that. And resilience not in a form of resistance, but really embracing it, I think is, at least from my point of view, the second core competence of impact entrepreneurs.
Love that. Thank you very much. I think that's very interesting, actually, putting those two things. Actually, there are different skills that, especially, it sounds like more demanding to be an impact entrepreneur, in your words. Who would be can you give an example of great impact entrepreneurs who are doing with are role models eventually in that space?
I mean, there's so many great entrepreneurs out there that are doing amazing things. And one of the businesses I personally like a lot, for example, and I use actually every day is the Tomorrow Bank. So the name is actually very similar to you guys. Tomorrow Bank just enables sustainable banking or a sustainable use of your savings and bank accounts. And what I like about them is just how explicit they also are, besides having a great product, how explicit they are in communicating about the things they do, in talking about the company culture that they've built, with just a new understanding and embracing the complexity of the new work age and allowing for more flexibility for their staff to take days off if they mentally don't feel ready for it or for other reasons they need time. It's just a company built around people. And that, I think, is what excites me a lot about Tomorrow Bank. Now, through my work now at the Respond program, I get to work every year with 10 entrepreneurs from across the globe. So this year we have startups literally from Chile all the way to Hong Kong that join the accelerator program. And I mean, obviously, by nature of the selection process, I'm a big fan of all of these startups. And I totally root for them and the success in the future. But the beauty for me in working with the entrepreneurs is really that throughout the program, over the 6 months that we work with the entrepreneurs, we place a very strong focus on leadership development. And this touches exactly upon what we've been discussing earlier, developing the skill sets to navigate this uncertainty and to embrace the ambiguity, to find sources of energy for the entrepreneurs to come up with that resilience that is needed for them to build their businesses. So this is the journey that I'm on, and it's been incredibly rewarding in that sense.
That's an amazing point. And you mentioned you're a fan of those 10 startups, which I totally relate to. But how do you select them? Or let's put it differently, how do you select the people, the founders behind there? What are you looking in actually? What kind of founder competencies, mindset are you looking for?
Yeah, it's a great question, because the selection process tries to accomplish both for us. So typically we get to see, we actively scout around 1,500 to 2,000 startups every year across the globe, of which we receive on average, I would say, around 500 applications. And in the end, 10 startups make it to the program. So you can already see it's a highly, highly selective process that the entrepreneurs go through in applying for the Respond program. And in that process, we do two things. We look at the impact potential and how it's coupled to a business model. So we would try to understand for every applying startup, what is the problem they're trying to address? What are the communities and stakeholders involved in that problem framing? And critically, of course, how is the proposed solution going to address these challenges? Now, given that Respond is embedded by the BMW Foundation and it's carried by philanthropic money, we also have the flexibility to work with solutions that are not the straightforward venture capital cases like other accelerator programs would do. But we actually have the freedom to also work with nonprofit organizations or with perhaps impact business models that just foreseeably take longer to take root and to scale. And this, in the end of the day, means that our set of criteria is not a rigid, fixed list of things that we need to check off, but it's a case-by-case analysis where, as I mentioned, the first element would be what is the impact and business case to it, and the second element for us is obviously, as you're saying, is there a founder fit to what we are going to provide in the accelerator program? So, as I mentioned, the accelerator is very much geared towards leadership development topics. Things we talk about, for example, is mental health for entrepreneurs. We talk about building teams. We talk about organizational structures and governance that may be different to the conventional VC model.
How much of the skills and competence you mentioned before do they need to bring already to your program? So how much do they need to have developed their drive, their iteration capabilities, systemical thinking? And how do you assess that as well? So if you say that's relevant, do you assess it actually? Is this something you try to figure out?
It's definitely something we try to figure out. I wouldn't go as far as saying we have completely solved how to really, measure for it and screen for it properly. But there are things and questions that we ask, such as questions around the startups or the companies' diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. And from reading just a few sentences about it from the entrepreneurs, you get a pretty good sense whether or not this is something that has crossed their minds, whether or not this is something that they would like to work on, if there are questions related to it, they think they solved it. In the end of the day, I think the tone of voice of, the entrepreneur reading through the application form, then on the phone call with the entrepreneurs, you get to sense how much of their motivation is driven by, being part of an accelerator program that comes with a strong brand and a strong backing, versus how much of the motivation comes from the being keen to work on those challenges. And to answer the other question, if this is a prerequisite to enter the program, I would say no. Simply for the fact that we also don't know all the answers. Like there is no starting and no end point to build your resilience, if you will. But what we do want to see is, as I mentioned, the drive and the interest to be working on those topics and engaging in leadership development, and the understanding or the belief that working on leadership is arguably one of the key drivers of success in the startup.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. So one of the things, what you say, it's really important that they have the right purpose, the right motivation, which they bring in, and then as well that they have the curiosity to actually learn and embrace what is happening and grow. If you look to the people actually you personally surround yourself with, maybe in the team, what would you say is for you the most important actually skills you're looking there?
It's a great question. So overall in my team, I try to put a lot of emphasis on just a good and friendly climate among us. So this comes with a lot of openness, being willing and being able to articulate, worries or feelings or situations from your private life, for example, where they could play a role in your sort of day-to-day work, your active work. So just being open and mindful to those kind of feelings or situations in the work environment is something that I highly value in our team, and that I would also like to encourage going forward with new team members, which I think in the end of the day is very much a mindset thing. It's not necessarily a skill set. When it comes to skill sets, the things that, I mean, we working with entrepreneurs and very much working in a sort of emergent space overall, I think all of us on the team need to bring this entrepreneurial creativity and drive ourselves to the tables. I'm incredibly happy to be working with folks on my team that are all keen to build new things and try out new stuff, and that are not afraid of trying things, learning from them, and then iterating in the next step. And obviously, again, being backed by philanthropic money, by the BMW Foundation, we are able to, go a little bit wild, probably more wild than the standard for-profit organization with investors, etc., would be able to do. And it is exactly this sort of playful openness and curiosity that definitely, I think, needs to be a core element of our work and our people.
It sounds really great, especially I think the vibe, that's how you describe it, is a more innovative environment for that purpose, and therefore increase the chances of actually creating something outstanding. And talking about a little bit more about who are you actually building up in your community? Who are the people which helped you in your career actually the most? What are the people you're relying on?
Sure. So I think as I said, I think a very entrepreneurial father, first of all, as a starting point in my career. And I still go back to my dad to discuss sort of work-related things and sort of brainstorm about next steps or talk about ideas. And he actually challenges me a lot because he's been one of the, how do you call it, the demonstrators in front of the nuclear power plants in Germany and sort of blocking the railways and cargo transports, etc. So he's been on the activist side of things and now still engages in politics. And he actually likes to challenge me the most whether or not the impact that I have in the entrepreneurship space is really where the change is going to happen or whether it's going to come from the political side of things. And that actually, I like those discussions and I like that challenging because it really brings you back to the question, where do you achieve the most impact possible with the time you have? And I just love that setting because it gets your priorities back in order, it gets your focus back in order, and it just helps you concentrate on the things that really are.
All that experience with goosebumps. I love this. Yeah. I think we all need to have somebody who is challenging us on our purpose. Are we doing enough? Are we consistent with our purpose actually and motivation? And that's exciting, I think, to have somebody like that actually on your side and always continuously challenging you.
Absolutely. And he is relentless. He would never stop challenging me.
Let's take it the other way around. Who do you think you have had the chance to help most? In what way?
That's a great question. I mean, I consider myself very much on a leadership journey myself, right? So a lot of those leadership things that we talk about, I would consider myself being far away from having solved all of this or having implemented everything perfectly. Now, the entire accelerator program really is built around a very, let's say, personal relationship. So I would say the key priority for me, even in the accelerator program, is that after those 6 months of acceleration, we walk away with, of course, ventures that are in a better place to scale and are more equipped to grow and all of this. But we also walk away with a sense of community and a sense of a supporting community. So actually a lot of time in the accelerator program is just spent around building the social tissue between the entrepreneurs in the program, but also, of course, us as a team. And I would hope that through some of those friendships now that have emerged and some of those sparring sessions and discussions, I would have been able to add here and there to some of the entrepreneurs that we've been working with. And obviously also to my team, as much as I can, I try to make myself obsolete, if you will. So I am always driven by empowering my team to do the job better than I would do it. And I guess it comes with a few tough conversations. It comes with a bit of cold water here and there. But it's definitely what I strive for, and I hope in the best way possible that I can to provide a growth environment for the people that I work with on their journeys.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. So you help your team to outgrow themselves, which is, I think, really important on all of us, I think, to be actually have people who are supporting us. If you're looking back, maybe one step to when you started to study, or when you finished school eventually, if you look back, what advice would you give yourself, to your younger self today?
Oh my God, don't worry. I would say. I mean, after school, I really had no idea what I wanted to do whatsoever. And eventually I ended up talking to different, I don't know how you call them, almost like a career advisor for your sort of next steps, university degrees, etc. And I went there, and the feedback was I should study medicine. I should become a doctor. It's like, no. The only takeaway I had from this was that it was totally not me being a doctor, because I don't know, it never really resonated, and I couldn't even tell you why exactly, but it never resonated, and it still doesn't. But what came out of the conversation was that my sort of numerical mindset and the analytical mindset was very, very strong, and that led me to eventually studying engineering. But actually for engineering, the same thing happened. I was like, no, I don't want to be an engineer. So I felt like I needed to mix it up a little bit, and ended up studying engineering and management at the same time, which now looking back, I think was a sort of great groundwork, great basis for everything that happened afterwards. But still, like, engineering in itself, or engineering and management in itself, isn't something that would or has resonated with me at the time. So I ended up really during my degree to do a bunch of different things and explore different modules in that class. In the end of my bachelor's degree, for whatever reason, I had sort of an overweight into economics courses that I took voluntarily on the side. And I had a thing for just working through economics and doing the math behind it, etc. So in my master's program, I decided to really focus on economics, and decided to do that not at a university in Berlin, where I was for my bachelor's program, but I decided to go to Portugal because there is a business school that teaches economics in a very applied kind of way. So it does a lot of working with numbers, statistics, formulas, Excel tools, and all of that, to really give as I said, this applied sense of economics versus a more philosophical side of economics that is part of many of the university degrees in Germany, for example. So I think this applied kind of mindset to things really helped me in my master's program to understand that building things and building models rather than just studying theories, doing it yourself, kind of, was, I think, a very empowering moment in my entrepreneurial sort of drive and energy, because for the first time I was moving away from calculating how an existing engine would work, or moving away from studying a theory that some guy 1,000 years ago developed, into sort of coming up with your own views, your own worldviews, if you will, your own models for how to describe it. I think that was like an aha moment for me to then move into entrepreneurship more consequentially.
So it was really something you figured out just by exploring and testing it, what resonates, and then deepening your interest literally where it resonated. Yeah.
Very intuitively, though. Really intuitively. Just like looking back at my studies, I think I never had the feeling of this is the perfect next step. This is what I'm going to do because it makes so much sense. Now looking back, I think it's more evident that a lot of it has been, guided by exploration and intuition, and it worked out very well, luckily. But at no point really in my studies did I have a feeling of, oh wow, this is now the right thing to do, because I really felt it. And this is also why I'm so excited to see sort of new concepts around learning and studying to come up now in this world, because I think, some of the things are not made for everyone, and we need to cater to different personalities and different mindsets and to different challenges in the world, frankly, nowadays than a couple of years ago. So we need to rethink our learning and how we study as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you mentioned with applied learning, that you have something where you not just in theory work something out, but actually see also how this may apply, is one of the key things, I think, to have this kind of satisfaction and see what it actually does. We have students in bachelor programs and master programs interdisciplinary learning on real world challenges. They all come in with a purpose. They figure it out, and I think a purpose is nothing which is set in stone, and then you literally follow it for your whole life. But something you're iterating also on. It's not just how you get there, but literally also what you're actually pursuing is something you learn out. Is there any advice you would like to give them? Anything? Say, hey, this is something you should consider. Maybe talking about the mindset. You mentioned a lot of things actually for impact entrepreneurs, which are relevant. Yeah.
It's a good question. I don't think there is much advice that I would be able to give around finding your purpose. But what I would say is that, just as you were saying, Christian, it is nothing you set into stone, right? And the decisions you take today and may seem huge and large, but if, a few weeks, a few months, a few years in, there's new crossroads and new pathways to go. So I wouldn't. My advice would be, again, to not worry too much, but also, follow the intuition that you have, and acknowledge that a lot of this is work in progress, and it will always be. Your environment will change, you will change, your values will change, the things that are important in your life will change, and with it, your purpose. It is totally fine to understand purpose as a snapshot, as a point in time, and no need to worry to find something that is going to stick with you for the rest of your life.
I think what you say is not worrying, but I think this process of self-reflection, listen to your own feelings, I think is very important. And I would even say that's a competence which is eventually required nowadays, and which, as you, I think, described, you sound like you're very self-fulfilled. And I think this is what it becomes. And by this kind of self-fulfillment, I think you're becoming also more impactful as a logical consequence out of that. Yeah. Yeah, and maybe one more word, because you mentioned also the topic resilience as a more and more important skill, I think, coming up. Yeah? Because of the complexity, and you mentioned also this kind of environment we're in. What's your thought? And you mentioned you're also helping leaders to become more resilient. Maybe you can give us one more do you apply any practice for yourself to be resilient?
Yes, I do. The answer is yes. And there is also great research actually done by an organization called the Resilience Institute based in Switzerland that do quantitative analysis over what resilience actually means in leadership positions. And part of their research or their findings is obviously, and it's probably no surprise, that your habits play a huge role in your resilience. And let me see if I can remember all of them. I'm sure I'll find a few of them. I remember the most important driver of stress and anxiety as the opposite to resilience is how you engage with screens, namely your computer or your phone, in the 60 minutes before you go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And what they find is that the melatonin levels, so the hormone that basically puts you to sleep, into very deep sleep,
Mm-hmm.
is, it never reaches the full scale of what it should reach.
Mm-hmm.
And it kicks in way later into the night if you use a screen, and phones are the worst really, because you're so close to your face. If you use a screen in the 60 minutes before you go to sleep. If you compare to the control group that uses no screens in that time, you can actually see that the melatonin level kicks in way earlier and way higher, which puts them to sleep in a more relaxed, more recharging state. And actually in less amount of hours slept, those people would feel more recharged and more sort of energized the next day. And this, I think, looking around, looking at my habits, looking at my friends' habits, for example, I am convinced that this is a super powerful driver for all of us to sort of bring down our stress levels and really rethink the way you engage with your phone. And there's other examples, other drivers than the resilience studies, such as how well you're able to integrate recharging elements in your day-to-day, such as sports, for example. There are things around how do you react in situations where you can feel your emotions or your anger or your stress literally boiling up to a point where you're moving into panic mode. How well are you able to rebound from this? Is it through, for example, breathing exercises or whatnot? So it's comparatively minor details and minor things that you can learn, really. Research on the web, learn, and embed in your day-to-day without making major changes that will drive your resilience levels up.
Very nice. I love that. It's a very concrete thing, takeaway, actually. Something we can easily do. And it's not that it's something like something
Absolutely.
really complex, but starting to put your phone away or you're turning off your computer in time before you go to bed, I think is a very important part. But also what you mentioned, I think is really important, the habits you're building up, which you're not doing consciously, but actually just automatisms can help you become more resilient. Bennet, thank you so much for all these questions and answers you could give now. I'm really excited. It's really helpful for future change makers, future leaders who want to become entrepreneurs, creators, shapers of eventually new companies, businesses, but also of just projects or movements. Yeah.
I would hope so.
Thank you for being with us, and thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Christian. Talk soon.